My name is Godfrey Hall and I'm the chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society based in Bath. We have been in existence for 90 years in Bath, and we are a charitable trust fund, educational trust fund, and we provide support. One of our purposes is to provide support for students from Commonwealth countries who would normally not be able to attend university in Bath. So we split our dealings between Bath Bar and the University of Bath. We have a lot of contact with both universities. We also have contact with Norland, and a lot of the population of Bath are involved in many of the things that we do. We have a grant scheme which supports projects that are Commonwealth related in Bath, not only at the university but also within Bath itself. I don't know whether you know of several of these, but there is one in particular, someone who runs a hairdressing company in Bath who then provides support for youngsters in India, etc. So there are a number of projects that are operating that we support as well. We obviously, as a Commonwealth Society, are an inclusive society. Our connections with the multi-faith group was that one of our trustees, the Provost Chancellor of Bath Spa University, attended one of William's talks and came back and said it was wonderful, amazing, and that we should be involved. So I approached William, and we basically said that we were quite happy to host and sponsor this event this evening. Can I now welcome our special guest, who is the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Somerset, Caroline Boddington, who's here tonight to be part of the event, and also the ex gratia Mayor of Bath, Dina Romero, who's very kindly come along and who will be saying a few words in a minute. But I'm now going to hand over to Dina for the introductions. Thank you very much.
Well, I was actually expecting Godfrey to speak for a little bit longer. So, good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be here. Obviously, the more observant of you will recognise I am not the current mayor. I am not Professor Barrett Pankania. He is sadly unable to attend tonight, and I know he is disappointed to have been double booked on this occasion. The mayor's theme is education, and I know he would have enjoyed hearing the various views and insights into different faiths and beliefs. But Mr. Mayor's loss is my gain. I was mayor during 2022 to 2024, and my theme focused on the people of Bath. I said they were the beating heart of the city. And so this conversation between the religious communities of our city is of equal interest to me. I look forward to hearing the different points of view, and even more so about how much we have in common regardless of the specifics of our beliefs. This will be incredibly reassuring when we live in such troubling times. I think we are really privileged that we have such an active interfaith group in our city, and I think we will have a fantastic evening. So I will now hand over to the next speaker.
I think that's me, and I think we're not having.
Okay, I'll try and speak clearly. We are recording this, so if anyone does an intervention they would rather not have recorded, do please tell us afterwards. So, it says here, moment of reflective silence. That's how we like to start our meetings. So yeah, I'm William Heath. I'm a Bath Quaker. There are interfaith experts in this room. They're sitting on my right. I'm not one of them. But I volunteered to join the interfaith group, and within 2 months I was elected chair. So that's why I've been asked to speak. I'll just have to say, as I found it, and speak from my personal experience, I've also been a trustee of Fairfield House. It'll be sort of 9 years by next March. So I've learned an awful lot at Fairfield House, and I will draw on that also, that experience. Bath, I mean, what a wonderful room. How lovely to see you all. Bath is a wonderful place and a wonderful community. But we're facing a set of serious issues. First up, climate. Our buildings are beautiful, but they don't cope very well with extreme rainfall, and they won't keep us cozy when the temperature is minus 50 degrees centigrade. We have very high levels of inequality, with parts of our small community in real poverty. There's a lack of affordable housing, with 6,000 on the waiting list. Alarming levels of isolation and mental health, affecting young and old, men and women. And like the rest of the country, we've got a rising tide of hatred and intolerance. National politicians seem to now find it acceptable to be openly racist, and local social media reveals alarming levels of intolerance. I think that's rooted in a wider, enduring, residual colonial mentality, which pervades our education, our cultural life, our religion, our media. It's all over our stately homes. It's on the walls of our abbey. And I'm really pleased that it's the Royal Commonwealth Society that suggested and organised this evening. Thank you. Because it sits at the centre of that journey from empire and colonialism through post-colonialism to a future where we acknowledge the wrongdoings of the past and treat the people of all nations as equals. Our public services too often seem to be delivered without compassion, and I think our approach to all these challenges could be said to lack faith. There's a lack of clarity about the values that guide our big decisions. So as an example, Dina and I served on the Future Ambition Board that was set up to bring the council together with leading anchor organisations. It's a noble endeavour, but it does tend to see everything through a lens of economics and business. It feels like we're positioning ourselves to get the next government grant from WECA. But we're not poor enough to be a basket case, and nor are we an outstanding candidate for investment for growth. There's no real voice of faith, hope, compassion, inspiration in the secular conversations about our future. But Bath's always been a place of deep faith. The sacred hot springs, where our ancestors honoured their tutelary goddess Sol, were in turn appropriated by the Romans, who associated them with Minerva. Let's remember that the 1590 Royal City Charter states that those waters should be accessible to the people of Bath in perpetuity. St Dunstan crowned Edgar I, King of England, in our abbey. He was also accused of allowing too much immigration, plus ça change. The saintly Alphege preached moral values at a time of terrible widespread hate, violence, and enslavement. And as well as sacred places and people of deep faith, Bath also has remarkable interfaith exemplars. The monk Abdelnour, in the 12th century, travelled to Syria and Palestine and Morocco. He brought algebra and the zero and Greek philosophy via Arab scholars to the West. In the 20th century, Bath's most famous resident, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, devout Christian, built the UK's first Ethiopian Orthodox church here, and is himself deified by the Rastafari. I'm a fan of former Christchurch Rector Dr. Marcus Braybrook, who co-founded the Three Faiths Forum. My first encounter with interfaith work was a talk by him in the old Quaker meeting house. His Three Faiths Forum became the Faith and Belief Forum, about which more later. And just look at our panel today. We have Reverend Heather Smith, Marcus's successor at Christchurch, who has a master's in interfaith studies and should really be the one giving this talk. Isabel Russo, the first ever humanist chaplain to the Mayor of Bath, who gave a really inspiring address in Bath Abbey, focused particularly on compassion and integrity. Sheikh Dr. Mohammad Gamal Abdelnour, a learned scholar, Imam of our own Al-Muzzafar Bath Mosque. And Martin Palmer, theologian, sinologist, both a Christian and a Taoist priest, advisor to popes and royalty, and a true world pioneer in faith environmentalism. As the secular world loves to remind us, not everything about organised religion is automatically good. Like any other human activity, it suffers from human failings. It's sometimes been used throughout history to manipulate people, to acquire wealth and power, to justify division and domination and wars and atrocities and injustices. But perhaps we're not making the most of all that is wonderful about our faith traditions. In Bath, local people have lost access to the sacred hot springs unless we pay our money to a YTL company. Alphage's Holy Well is inaccessible. It sits on private land and it's totally overgrown. John Wesley's pulpit at Kingswood School is in a sort of junk room with cardboard boxes and Christmas tree decorations. Haile Selassie's house is full of day-to-day life, but the building has been neglected for decades with rotted joists, extensive water damage, and a shockingly bad energy certificate. And interfaith work also has its ups and downs, and it could be said today to be at a low ebb. Nationally, the Interfaith network had its Home Office funding pulled. It was dissolved in January this year, and it leaves a sad and empty website. The latest in a series of Bath church networks, the Bath Christian Action Network, has just disbanded, leaving a hacked website advertising gaming and gambling services. Some of our churches are not too kindly disposed towards interfaith work. Here's one message. Dear Mr. Heath, I would rather not hear from the Bath Interfaith Group. We wholeheartedly believe Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And as he said, no one comes to the Father but through him. We try to evangelize those from other faiths that they might be saved. End quote. And the Bath Interfaith Group itself is quite prone to othering. Within days of taking over its chair, I'd heard examples of misogyny, racism, prejudice based on faith distinctions, and a challenging atmosphere in which it was hard to get anything done. Now, given all that, the challenges our community faces, the underappreciation of what is best about our faith traditions, what are the opportunities for interfaith work in Bath? Trying to get people with different beliefs to get along isn't easy. Bath Interfaith Group did some research with Bath Spa University. We identified 101 distinct faith groups in and around Bath. Of those, 87 are Christian. We're also blessed to have Baha'i, Buddhist, Druid, humanist, Hindu, Jewish, pagan, Rastafari, and others. And much of the diversity in the Bath faith landscape resides in the university societies. It's obviously a predominantly culturally Christian environment. I mean, the 2021 census has almost half stating no religion, which is up 15% in 10 years. 42% saying Christian, which is down 14% in 10 years. So Christians are the largest group. And of course, there's considerable diversity under the single heading Christian, with significant implications for interfaith work. Alan Race, the author of Christians and Religious Pluralism and other interfaith books, he proposes 3 categories. Exclusivist, ours is the only path to salvation, enlightenment, or transcendent transformation. Inclusivist, ours is the best of the choices on offer. Or pluralist, multiple religions offer valid paths to salvation or enlightenment. These mysteries are beyond verbal formulation, so we're all doing our best. Now, outside those categories that he identifies, you have extreme pluralists who assert that all religions are basically the same. But in interfaith work, the whole point is to respect and celebrate the differences and the different insights they offer. At the other extreme, there are, of course, violent fundamentalists and religious nationalists. And violent fundamentalists don't belong in an interfaith group. They belong in jail. It's also reasonable for an interfaith community to reject fundamentalist ethno-nationalists, whether it's the sort of Steve Bannon or the late Charlie Kirk type in the States, or the lesser-known religious nationalists who spoke at Tommy Robinson's recent Unite the Nation rally. If we're non-negotiable about compassion and integrity, about the golden rule, we really can't engage constructively with people who set out to distort the truth and to use the language of faith to exclude and harm others, setting us on a path that leads inevitably to conflict and violence. If we don't call them out, we seem to tolerate them, even to support them, just because they present their policy and behavior as based in faith. We have to reject them. I think there's a valuable role here for extreme satire. In last week's episode, South Park Elementary School has adopted muscular Christianity. They've sacked the counselor and they've appointed Jesus instead. Jesus goes to the principal's office and, bewildered, he says, "Could I ask, exactly what branch of Christianity are you?" And he decides he doesn't belong there. We all heard rising Tory star Katie Lamb's comments about deporting people who are legally here. People like our present mayor, like my wife, like all our lodgers, like many of you who are here today. I think if you want a visual metaphor for her cultural coherence, just revisit Maggie Blackamoor vomiting at the church fete in Little Britain. David Omand, a Securocrat and former GCHQ boss, is not someone I've ever knowingly agreed with about anything. But in a recent Economist article, he argues that social cohesion in the face of extremism is a national security imperative. It's the clearest possible argument for the importance of interfaith work. But we do it willingly and for free. We do it according to our faith traditions, not because the Home Office pays us to. So who's with us? To build our interfaith work, let's set aside the deplorables, the violent, obviously, and also the fundamentalist ethno-nationalists. The pluralists and the inclusivists would seem to be the easiest fellow travellers. But I suggest it's very important that we work with those with exclusivist tendencies. Yes, they're suspicious about interfaith work. We have to respect that. But we have to meet people where they are, not where we might want them to be. In a climate emergency, we're all in the same boat. When the politics of cruelty brings deportations to our community, we'll need the broadest possible basis of solidarity between people of good faith. We might disagree on matters of faith, but we can agree about violence against minoritized groups, about vandalism or desecration of sacred locations, about exploitation of the poor, whether it's through price gouging, rogue landlords, or fixed odds betting terminals. And we'd probably agree about soulless housing developments, which don't have access to nature, to community, or to faith space. So we have a lot in common with people of good faith, even if they tend to be exclusive. We just need to adapt our approach to make that work. Do things ever change? Well, yes, they do. I'd give two shining examples of progress. My dad worshipped and volunteered at Bath Abbey. My mum found it unwelcoming. And it wasn't long ago that one senior Bath Abbey leader told me that their mission was, in a cringe-inducing phrase, to colonize the community for Christ. And another senior Abbey leader rejected the idea that the Abbey should be the center of faith for our community and argued that its role was to be the leading evangelical organization in the region. But in recent years, the Abbey's welcomed Ethiopian Orthodox worship. It's reinterpreted those difficult monuments which are on its walls. It's welcomed the mayor's first humanist chaplain. Under the leadership of Canon Guy Bridgewater, who's just retired, it became more inclusive and more welcoming, and we're thankful for that. The second example is Fairfield House, which is transformed in recent years from a sort of dilapidated squat, where the council planned to hand over the site, part of the site to the UK. The council planned to hand over the site of the UK's first Ethiopian Orthodox Church to the NHS. It's become a place where Rastafari and Ethiopian Orthodox traditions are welcomed and celebrated as central to the life of the community. Some of the most globally famous Rastafari, and last year alone, 4 Ethiopian Orthodox archbishops have made their pilgrimages to Fairfield House, and the radically diverse communities there work together to preserve and celebrate Haile Selassie's cultural and faith legacy to our city. My point is, there's not just huge potential, but also signs of renewed energy in interfaith work. So how does Bath Interfaith Group interpret and respond to that? What are we called to do? I mean, we do see a universal and global context to this. So, for example, we joined Karen Armstrong's international project, the Charter for Compassion. At a national level, King Charles set the strongest possible tone for interfaith work with his remarks to faith leaders about Britain as a community of communities. And there are several promising national interfaith initiatives. There was a government-commissioned Faith and Belief Forum consultation, which David Musgrave and I took part in. That resulted in a powerful Bursting the Bubble report, which said local groups should be courageous, should break out of our narrow interfaith worlds, to engage with secular society, address difficult or controversial topics, try new ways of working, including tailoring different ways to work with different faith groups. There's a follow-up to that. Matt McCabe and I went to the Asher Centre in the Forest of Dean, met a range of national and other local interfaith bodies. I think the sense of that meeting was one of opportunity and new energy. The group issued a shared statement of intent to make itself easier to work with the government and the civil service. Then there's a United Religions Initiative event to build partnership and chart a course for the interfaith movement in Oldham in November. Narinda and I are going to that, and also on the 26th of November, a Future of the Interfaith Movement, convened in London by Canon Hilary Barber, who does amazing work at Halifax Minster. So nothing's set in stone about this. And without a specific, definite objective, it's not really clear to anyone how best to proceed. But these are definite stirrings, definite signs of energy and broad willingness. Where are we in Bath? Well, the Bath Interfaith Group has a solid constitution. It's got some long-standing members. It's got a robust democratic election process. And this year it's continued to do what it's good at, like the annual pilgrimage walk, the mayor's gathering, where this year we discussed his theme, education and empowerment. We had prayers for world peace. I think we found we were already carrying out those bursting the bubble report recommendations, trying to be courageous, trying to burst out of that interfaith bubble, trying to address difficult topics and work in new ways. We created our first website. We're trying to be more active on social media. Our governing group now includes humanists, Ethiopian Orthodox, Rastafari. We have a much easier joining process. Do try it out. I think we've doubled or trebled our membership in the course of this year. We've started to engage with the relevant issues of the day. So when our MP had to vote on an assisted dying bill in Parliament, we prepared a range of faith perspectives and a robust discussion before the vote. We're starting to find our voice on, for example, giving statements on hate crimes, to give the impression, when you come for one faith group, you come for us all. And we engaged, together with our patrons, the Lord Lieutenant and the Mayor, with the peculiarly English process of appointing a new rector to Bath Abbey. Ask me afterwards. We do recognise the vital role that sacred space plays in our community, and we hope that all would feel welcome there, irrespective of faith tradition. And we've started to tackle the most difficult conversations. What language should we use, What about the horrors in Israel-Palestine? That was the first. There will be more. We're trying to go deeper into matters of faith, to explore the miraculous and the mystic. The first one of those is on the 14th of November, when Professor Peter Hawkins and Imam Mohammad will dive into Sufism and how it faces up to today's challenges. It's really good to see that this chimes, by the way, with the RCS theme for Bath, which I think is enchantment, mystery, and illusion in the Commonwealth. So to conclude, here's what I see the faiths working together, respecting each other's positions, principles, and beliefs, need to do and can do. On the climate, we have to have faith. We have to keep hope. If governments are ineffectual, with some careering off in the wrong direction, it's all the more important that the faiths set up motivating people, institutions, and resources. The Catholics have Laudato Si, the Muslims have the Covenant for the Earth, Al-Mizan, and these are powerful, authoritative calls for faith-based action addressing huge global communities. Martin's an expert on this and perhaps can tell us more. Be relevant, engage with secular society. There's organisations there who have resources and they have a desire to do good, but they don't really understand the real social needs in our community. If we're going to build 27,000 new homes, I think we should engage in the consultation. Baines is obviously going to get two sorts of response. There'll be NIMBY, and there'll be, I've already heard this, if only we stopped the boats, we wouldn't have to build any new houses. Both easily disprovable. But as people of faith, I imagine we accept the need for affordable new homes, and we want those homes to be beautiful, sustainable, to have nature running through them, to have community spaces and spaces for faith. So imagine if we could speak with one voice to that effect. The Council and Bath University are embarking on redevelopment of Bath Quays North. Straightforward commercial development principles based just on politics and economics would probably deliver soulless offices and more student accommodation. But I think we would like to see some spirit and some soul in there, perhaps with a non-denominational faith space at the heart of it. Shouldn't Bath's faith actively engage in that process? The rising tide of hatred, the rise even of fascism. I think we have to promote the core values at the heart of our faiths and traditions, which Isabel set out so powerfully in Bath Abbey, centrally compassion and integrity. I think we have to call out intolerance and aggression, either when it's against faith groups, and we were thinking principally of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, though I have to say, Quakers were not best pleased when the Met Police recently kicked in the front door of Westminster Meeting House. But also intolerance and aggression by extreme religious nationalists, be they Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu. And there are examples of all those around the world. When they break the golden rule, they pervert the core teaching of their own religious tradition for their own base human purposes, to consolidate power. We have to do what we can to identify and move beyond that colonial mentality. There's nothing like visiting Jamaica and Kenya, as I did for Fairfield House, to understand the enduring impact Britain has had on communities there. In that respect, I'm really pleased that tonight's organisers and sponsors of the RCS have also decided to support a specific school in rural Kenya, Merigwit School in Laikipia County, and there's a meeting about that later this month. If we want Bath's very own visible champion against the colonial mentality, against fascism, and against racism, we have all three in one, with the eminent example of Haile Selassie, a global anti-colonialist who we welcomed in Bath as an anti-fascist, as a war refugee, and he's an iconic figure in the fight against racism. There's really something very powerful going on at Fairfield House, 2 Kelston Road, and if you haven't taken the historic tour, I strongly recommend that you do. If we have to have British values, let's do what we can to ensure they are multi-faith values, rooted in the best of the world's faith and philosophical traditions, embracing truth and compassion, and steering us away from conflict and violence. There's lots to do. With division, timidity, and introspection, we'll achieve nothing, but with combined resources and energy, we can achieve a lot. So with that, I would like to hand over to our panel and initially just ask them for short responses to that, about their experience or impression of interfaith work in Bath and how they see the potential. Sort of 3, 4, 5 minutes each. And we'll put it alphabetically by first name, then that's you, isn't it? Would you like to start? Yes, is that okay?
Thank you, William. Can everyone hear me?
Do speak up. Do you want to stand? Would that even help? Would it help if she stood? Heather, yeah.
I don't think it's working.
That's not an order, it's a recorder. It's not. Would you very much mind standing? Would that be okay? You must be used to. Yeah, come to the. Yeah. It's not connected. No. No. Project like an old style priest.
Is that all right?
Because the microphone connects to the toilet.
Is that better?
So you just project as much as you can. There's no PA in the room.
Yes.
This is just for recording. Yeah.
So, can you all hear me? I'll shout as loud as I can. So I arrived in Bath at Christ Church in February this year. So I'm very new to Bath. And one of my main priorities has been interfaith work. So being relatively new, it means that much of what's been happening in Bath and much of what William has told us about what's been happening in Bath over the past several years is completely outside the frame of my knowledge. But I have been involved in international interfaith dialogue for several years. And I think the thing that I want to say to underpin what William has said is that the most important thing is to develop friendships. If you don't develop friendships but try to work together, then it probably won't work. This week, some of you may know, is the 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, the document which the Roman Catholic Church issued in 1965. And it transformed the Roman Catholic Church's attitude to the Jews, but also, importantly, to other world faiths. So I just wanted to tell you some of what the document includes, and I apologise that it's rather not inclusive language, but it was 1965. The Church, therefore, exhorts her sons that through dialogue and collaboration with the followers of other religions, carried out with prudence and love, and in witness to the Christian faith and life, because it's a Catholic document, they recognise, preserve and promote the good things, spiritual and moral, as well as the socio-cultural values found amongst these men. We cannot truly call on God if we refuse to treat in a brotherly way any man created as he is in the image of God. Man's relation to God the Father and his relation to men, his brothers, are so linked together that the scripture says, "He who does not love does not know God." No foundation, therefore, remains for any theory or practice that leads to discrimination between man and man or people and people, so far as their human dignity and rights flowing from it are concerned. So at the same time as the publication of Nostra Aetate, or at least in Europe, there was a widespread opinion that religion would gradually die out and the world would become secular. Christian belief in the country was reducing. People thought that religion as a whole was irrelevant. People believed that every country and every group was like us in that respect, a completely secular society waiting to happen. But world events and increasing interaction between peoples across the globe have shown this to be a massive mistake. In today's world, you can't ignore religion. It's important to too many people. Nostra Aetate is Latin for in our time. The document referred to the 1960s, but here in Bath in our time, the 2020s, I believe that the most important thing to achieve the things that William has been talking about is that we hold out our hands in friendship and learn to work together to address the problems our world faces, whether they're practical, such as climate, or human relationships. Learning to be friends is vital. We must learn to understand and value one another. Groups like Bath Interfaith and the new United Relations Initiative are so important. We need to get to know each other on a local, nationwide and international level. Thank you.
Super, thank you. So Isabel, can I ask you to follow up? Are you comfortable speaking from here?
Yeah, that's fine. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Just put your hand up if you can't. So thank you so much, Hannah, and I completely agree and resonate with your, the main thesis of we have to be friends, we have to make friends, actively make friends and be friends. I haven't written a speech. I just wanted to kind of speak as I found in response to what was being said, which is a bit nerve-wracking. And forgive me if I just talk a load of gobbledygook, hopefully with one or two things of interest. I kind of want to go, I was motivated to go right back to my childhood. So I could be here for about 2 hours, so William, do stop me. Because I grew up in Bath, and I remember going to my Christian primary school and secondary school, and I really felt very ashamed of myself because I didn't believe, and I would sit in assemblies, which I was generally late for because I didn't feel comfortable there, so I was always late for school, and I felt uncomfortable. I desperately wanted to be a good person. I've always had a kind of motivation to do good, to be good, to ask all of those moral questions about life and death and everything in between. But I would sit in that environment and I would feel guilty and shameful and like I didn't belong. And that wasn't helped by the teachers who reinforced that view of me when it became clear that I didn't hold religious belief. And I would be charged when I asked questions with doubting Thomas and how, what a bad friend he was to Jesus because he questioned. Now, I totally caveat that with my understanding of the Bible is not as it should be, and I'm sure there are nuances that I don't understand from many of the parables that I've taken against. But I know what I gleaned from my childhood experience was a sense of other, was a sense of right and wrong, of binary, of faith or no faith. And I think this is something that's really important to address as part of the Interfaith group. And I've only been a member for the last 3 months. So I feel very, very new to Interfaith. And I've got lots of books to read and people to talk to and friends to make. But I'm very, very hot, as I'm sure William would agree, and Narinder, on language. I think language is where our salvation lies. And I think when we start to unpick words like we're enraged by this graffiti on the cemetery, and we start to go, I'm appalled, I'm hurt, we have to be careful of the language that we use because we become that we hate. This is one of the big things that I've already really learned in the first few months with the Interfaith group. So I worked with Humanist UK for 7 years as their head of ceremonies, and it was really interesting because even within Humanist UK, which is a non-religious, morally driven, we're here to do good, we're good without God kind of environment, there were still right ways to not believe in God and wrong ways to not believe in God. And the National Secular Society would argue with us, and Sunday Assembly would argue with us that we weren't not believing in God in the right way. So it's quite exhausting, even in one faith or non-faith. I mean, it comes to me as well, and I think I'll stop in a minute because I'm probably going to run out of time, but the really big thing, and this is probably, I don't know anyway, I'm not going to judge myself before I've said it. What I'm really coming to feel at the moment, it is our salvation as well, is personal regulation and understanding. And for me, I know that I've been on a very long journey of trying to make sense of the world, trying to make sense of the meaning of life, of death, of sex, of relationship, of parents, of nature, of the world. And it feels to me that if we can have compassion for each other's journeys with these huge topics and be able to accept people's right to believe different things, but that doesn't mean that you accept what they believe, and that you have the courage to have robust conversations without being offended that somebody believes something different from you, then that's the way that we can move forward. So absolutely what Hannah says is make friends and be a friend. And let's work together with compassion, integrity, and generosity and patience with what we might sometimes think is absolute poppycock bonkers nonsense that other people believes. But there's also, there's a way of communicating that embraces the comedy of it all. I mean, how ridiculous we are as well, and the stupid things that we do to each other in the name of humanity and faith and love. I mean, we are quite ridiculous, and yet we are also extraordinary. And let's embrace that shadow in ourselves as well as the light in ourselves.
That would be a perfect moment to hand over to Martin Palmer, I think.
Well, first of all, thank you, William, for your, as usual, dramatically understated account of everything, which was splendid. We always enjoy your presentations. My background in Interfaith is that I, by accident, founded Europe's first multi-faith education centre in the 70s. By accident, in that I had absolutely no intention of doing that, but nobody seemed to be doing it, so I thought I might as well do it anyway. Because I could see that there were lots of multicultural centres, but faith was not part of it. Multicultural considered faith to be about as important as whether you liked Chinese takeaway or Indian takeaway. It wasn't fundamental in any way. And as such, it, I think, did a huge amount to foster racism, because it basically treated anything that was really different as deeply threatening. And faith was really different, because it didn't obey the rules. But I've had an off-on relationship with the interfaith world for some 50 years of my working life, in that I don't believe all religions are the same. I don't think we're all heading the same way. I don't think that every aspect of religion is valuable or important, but then I don't think the same about secular society either. And I remember a friend of mine who was the religious correspondent for The Independent, who attended the first meeting for nearly almost 100 years of something which rather grandly called itself the World Parliament of Religions. And his scathing review of it was that it was those who were no longer listened to meeting those who were no longer followed. And that has captured an awful lot of what the interfaith has been about. It's not actually been very important. It's not been very exciting. And the reason for that, I think, is very simple. I had the great privilege of being the religious advisor to His Royal Highness Prince Philip on the environment for 35 years. This was occasionally like being etiquette advisor to Attila the Hun, but it had its good moments as well. And what we did was we decided back in 1985, when he was the international president of WWF, that there was no future for the environmental movement if it was all based on data. Nobody was ever converted by a pie chart. We are changed and challenged by stories. It is narrative that opens doors for us, not data. And yet, I've watched over 50 years of working with all the major environmental groups around the world, their obsession with figures, with numbers, which a friend of mine at the Wellcome Foundation wonderfully summed up one day by saying, do you know why we call it numbers? Because it numbs us. We are a storytelling species. That's how we communicate. I once was the first ever religious speaker at the National Geographic Environment Conference. 500 scientists who were all there, horrified that somebody from the faiths had been invited. Absolutely horrified, scandalized. They were a serious scientific body. So after 24 hours with them, I stood up and said I was very pleased to be here, but I was horrified by all of them. Horrified by all of us. We're supposed to be horrified of you. I said, I've been here for 24 hours. I've met many of you. You've told me about how your granny used to go to a Baptist church. You've told me about how your husband is a Muslim. You've told me about how you go on Buddhist retreats and all the rest of it. None of you have told me how many calories you have for breakfast. Not a single fact or data was I given by any of you. You just told me stories. What kind of scientists are you if you just tell me stories, for God's sake? So when Prince Philip and I decided we would bring together the major environmental groups, including the UN, World Bank and so forth, with the major religions, we had a problem. This was in 1986. How do we invite people to come to something like this, particularly the secular, who, bless them, most of them behave like really bad old-fashioned missionaries. You know, we've got the truth. If only you accept the truth, we know how to save the world. Join us and we can save the world and you'll be saved as well. I'm going, we tried that. It didn't work very well as a strategy. So we decided what we would do was we would invite people to come, proud of your own tradition, and that applied to the secular world as much as it was to the religious, but humble enough to listen. And from that one meeting has come the largest environmental movement in the world, the environmental work of the major religions. There are more projects undertaken by the networks in the different faiths, Eco-Sikh, Eco-Islam, the Taoist movements, Christian movements, than all the other major secular NGOs combined. When do you ever hear about it? No, because it doesn't quite fit, does it? And the key part, I think, to interfaith is that when we get together as religions and talk about religion, it is monumentally boring. When we meet because a secular group like WWF has said, what have you got to say about our relationship with life on Earth? Because we want to know, because we might actually want to work with you, then the agenda is set, exactly as William has been saying, by the huge issues that confront us, for which the faiths have responses. There are now 2 million religious environmental programs around the world. When we started, there were 3. It can happen. And I've recently been asked by the new Pope to work with him. I worked a lot with Francis, but with the new Pope to work to particularly bring the other religions together with the Catholic Church. Why? Because what Francis did was he destroyed the notion that there was a Catholic bubble in which you could live totally and not need to be in touch with or relate to anything else. Which is why you have that phrase, lapsed Catholics, because that's when you fall out of it. By the way, have you ever met a lapsed Anglican? You see, our problem is there's actually nothing to lapse from, whereas the Catholics do have a little bit more to that. So exactly as William was saying, there is a lot that is happening. It's not all happening here, but it could. And the biggest side is that the Catholic Church has recognized it cannot do what it needs to do alone. It wants to work with all the major other religions. And the key area that we're working on are assets. Because the faiths run or manage 50% of all schools worldwide, 64% of schools in sub-Saharan Africa. We run more than a third of all the medical facilities of the world. We manage or oversee 10% of the habitable surface of the planet. And we are the fourth largest investing group in the world. So let's stop pretending that all we can do is pray at the beginning of a meeting with the mayor. That's nice. But 40% of all the primary schools in Bath are religious. So please don't ignore us. Don't pretend you can do education without us. You can't. Most of the social welfare, most of the mental health that is provided through the faiths. Not through institutions like the NHS, by the faiths. 2 years ago, it was estimated that the Methodist Church, which is only 500,000 people, provide £1 billion worth of community services free every year. So let's take seriously the business of it. Because without us, civil society would not continue. Without you from the secular side, we wouldn't be challenged to be better. That's what an interfaith partnership is about.
Yeah. Imam Mohammad, would you like to make the final panel intervention?
Good evening, everyone. Williams, thank you so much for such an insightful and thoughtful presentation. I really resonate with much of what you've said. I myself I've been born and raised in Egypt, a Muslim majority country with a Christian minority. Moved to the UK 2010, a Christian majority country with a Muslim minority. So I've lived both sides of the world, and I can see, the issues that Williams have touched upon are really serious ones. Especially, I noted a couple of them. I was really struck by Williams' focus on how we responded to questions of inequality, climate change, isolation. But what unites our responses to these is primarily the lack of faith, that lacked faith. This is really so true. And if I may add to it from the Islamic tradition, we have the concept of taqwa, that is being conscious of God or being mindful of God. And this means by definition that you feel that you have a sense of accountability. You are accountable not only for the people that you live with when it comes to these causes, but also that you are accountable for God for these causes. And when I look at how we respond to these things, think, for example, the question of climate change, we often think that when we do this work, we think of it as us doing some sort of secular work, when in reality, this should be done from a faith perspective as a sacred work, if you wish, giving us a moment or an incentive to work, as people who take this as part of the living, if you wish. Not only being satisfied with praying for change, but being the change ourselves. So I couldn't agree more with this, with highlighting this aspect of our interfaith work, the lack of faith in our responses to these areas. The second point I really resonated with is the question of pluralism. Pluralism has often been treated as a problem to be solved. And like I said, having lived in two different countries, Egypt and the UK, I did live this experience myself. Like I did a PhD on this threefold typology: inclusivism, exclusivism, and pluralism. So I know really the ins and outs of how these typologies have been examined in the two traditions. And I've always been struck by how the Quran treats the question of pluralism. The Quran does not treat it as a problem to be solved, but rather as a divine sign to be appreciated and celebrated. There is a wonderful verse in the Quran that says, Ya ayyuhan nasu, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. O people, we have created you from a single male and female, and we made you into nations and tribes. Then it says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. And we made you into nations and tribes so that you may come to, the Quran uses the word ta'arafu. The word ta'arafu really has three different meanings in Arabic. The first one is to recognize each other. The second is to work with each other. The third is to learn from each other. Three meanings, three positive meanings that relate to the word, as if God is telling us in the Quran that the purposes behind this sort of diversity that we have reduced into a problem. And it is all things that we really can work with each other on. So I hope we live until we see this concept being treated as a divine sign rather than a problem to be solved. My final point, to end with a positive note, Williams, you also raised the point about having difficult conversations in difficult times. Out of so many other places in the UK that I've lived in, I really found that Bath is really one of those places where we really could have this conversation. In this very room, I have my colleague and friend Iris, comes from the Jewish tradition. The first person that I've received a call from right after October 7th. And I do vividly remember her just starting the phone call, not knowing what to say. And all she would just ask to listen to each other, to make each other just feel that we are on this together. And we've really continued throughout this journey for up to more than 2 years by now. And I appreciated this deeply. And again, like I said, I always felt that Bath is a place that we really enjoyed this, and it is something that is worth mentioning. That's pretty much everything I wanted to share. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. So I think at this point we have a slight change in pace, change in tone. Anyone who has trains to catch, don't worry about that clock. It's an hour fast. But I suggest we set aside perhaps half an hour now for interventions from everyone here. If you've got either a brief question or a brief observation, and I think if these accumulate into themes, then we'll see if the panel can summarize their thoughts perhaps at the end. So I don't know if anyone wants to start with either a brief observation or a question, or whether you all want Godfrey to reopen the bar at the back. I don't know. Are you serving, Godfrey? Who would like to start with any form of comment? And if you do, I would ask you to perhaps stand up, because just for the acoustics, do take this. Yeah, Narinda has the recording mic. Perhaps our job is done. Perhaps we covered all the points we needed to cover. Yeah, Dina, this is just for recording. And yeah, okay.
So it doesn't matter, you can't hear me if I speak.
You need to speak audibly, even though you've got the microphone. That's what I'm trying to say.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So I was very struck, and I should have actually said this when I was first speaking, that one thing I did in the pandemic when I was the leader of the council, I was very conscious that as a council, we were often only speaking to a certain number of people, and there were other communities And that's when I tried to bring together all the different faith leaders so that the messages that we were being given by government and the health authorities could be then passed down more directly to those individual communities. And I was just wondering whether you, as sort of representatives of the, some of the faith groups, I forget, I think, William, you said that there were some extraordinary number of faith groups in and around Bath. And obviously, this is just a small selection. Whether you felt that that working together was still a key part of the work the Interfaith group does. Obviously, during the pandemic, there was, I suppose, a very specific driver, and as I said, about communication. But do you think that that is still important? And to be honest, can I also just say how impressed I have been with the speakers as well around what you have in the way that you've responded to what William has put forward to you as well. And I suspect you didn't have any idea what he was going to say to start with either. So that's really very impressive.
It's a cracking panel. Shall I respond directly to your point? I'm okay, I've got one. So I think Dina's question really is about whether the faith groups have a role in helping with two-way communication when there's matters of general importance to our whole community. And I think the answer is we should, and to date we've not been very well equipped to do that. I think neither the council nor the Interfaith group have had, if you want, like a database, a list of faith organisations in Bath. I'm really happy to say that Bath Spa University, who couldn't be here tonight but wanted to be, they closed down their School of Religious Studies, but they're quite keen to open it up again. And their first step has been to collaborate with us in some research. And they researched through open sources and ringing around the faith groups in Bath. And they've identified 101. They've put charity numbers to them, contact points. We've written to them all, because I think without that, there can't really be any voice of faith in our community, nor can there be two-way dialogue with faith communities. And some groups, the Methodists who mentioned, are so active in places like Twerton and Whiteway and reach communities very powerfully. So we think it's a priority to establish some sort of two-way dialogue, first of all with a list, then getting people's permission to stay in touch. And that's where we got that response saying, no, we don't want to hear from you, but we'll love bomb them and we'll get there in the end. Yeah. Who else has a question or observation? Thank you. Isabel, would you like to respond to that? Yeah.
I just want to clarify what I meant when I said what I said, and I'm truly sorry that what I said upset you. Thank you, Narinda. Sorry. So what I was alluding to when I said we shouldn't use the word outrage was I was talking about language and how important it is to use the right language, and what an education it's been to me in the last 3 months within the Interfaith group of trying to find language that expresses what we're really trying to achieve. And we've been doing that with, what would you call it, our constitution or whatever you...
We have a constitution, we have a closed conversation with us.
Yeah, so the constitution that we've been looking at and commenting on, it's so specific. And there'll be one word that just, for me as somebody who is a humanist, who doesn't have faith, might just, that's not quite right. It doesn't cover my perspective, or that's an assumption. Or what do you mean by that word? Because I have an assumption about that word. And what a relief I ask, because that's not correct. That's not the correct assumption, or I need to learn more about this. So we were writing a joint interfaith response had been written to the event that you've described of the desecration, the graffiti on the wall of the Jewish burial. And in the version, one of the versions, it said, "We, the Bath Interfaith Group, are outraged by this," right? Now, whilst I live in Combe Down and I'm deeply saddened by what's happened there, I felt that the word outrage wasn't a helpful word in an extremely sensitive situation, also where the Bath Interfaith Group is trying to find its voice and is having a collective response to this thing. For me, outraged is a very angry, fiery, unhelpful word. So for it to choose a word that would reflect all of our views, I felt was the important thing to do. So I put forward, I feel we shouldn't use outrage. I feel we should use something that's like appalled or deeply saddened or, distressed. But for me, outrage felt wrong. It felt not emotionally intelligent enough. So that's what, does that cover what, does that?
I think as an interfaith group, we recognise it's very important and also very difficult to get the right language to respond to situations about which people are rightly very sensitive. And we've tried to embark on this work. We've even identified a course, actually, offered by a Methodist prison chaplain from Exeter. He offers a course on how communities can hold difficult conversations. And we expect we'd have a lot to learn from that. So we're wondering if we'll be able to bring that course to Bath. Any further observations or questions? Thank you for that one, and that won't be in the record. Yes. Samanwa is a new Bath resident, so this will be an initial impression.
Yes.
5 weeks.
I was about to state that I wasn't sure I should say anything because I am so new to Bath. But it's more a reflection of, or maybe a question about the possibility of opportunity where there are more, where religions come together in some way for people who are very suspicious of religion, full stop. So that sense of, oh gosh, they want me to do that is, I find, shouldn't say I'm speaking on behalf of others, that I find really present, and people are very able to articulate these days in terms of why religion should not be trusted, yes, and why it is a force for bad in our world, and it's really easy for them to reach for examples of that. So rather than it being one religion, the example of religions coming together and having a joint dialogue, I think, speaks to something that is significantly different enough to have traction in that space. And I think it is in that space that this is really needed, because there is a reduction in trust and faith in our society. And so an opportunity to demonstrate how different people can come together feels like the right time to do it in a more visible way, because it demonstrates how we can do it, maybe not just across religions, but across races, across nationalities, across all those areas where we are really struggling as a society to communicate with each other honestly. We're very shouty, pointy right now. And if there is a language that is developed in this space that can help in other spaces, that feels like an opportunity. So that's an observation, not a Bath-specific thought. But it does feel like everything is here in Bath. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Samuel. Does anyone on the panel wish to respond to that at all? Heather. Martin, then Martin. Yeah.
I think there is a great deal of impression from a lot of people who are not religious that the problem with religions is they cause wars. They're awful. They cause wars. And I think that's something really difficult to get round. And I think it will take a long time, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I mean, my response to that is always, well, if it wasn't religions, it would be some other groups that people got themselves into that would cause wars. But that doesn't often wash with people who are determined that religions are bad because they cause wars. And I think we just have to, we have to work with each other. And I think that's why it's important. But I think it will take a long time. But we have to demonstrate that we can do it and it can be done.
That echoes Imam Mohammed's advice that we need patience, which he gave me privately. I was very grateful. Martin.
Thank you. Yes, this issue of the public perception of religion. I've done a huge amount of work in Russia, but also in China. And the fact of the matter is that more people have been killed by a secular ideology in the last 150 years than in all the wars of religion of which we have any record. So religions, yeah. But look at what Marxism and communism and fascism and nationalism have done. This is nothing special to us, sadly. I want to pick up on what Imam said and a little bit respond to the discussion that took place there as well. I totally agree with you that diversity is a gift from God. I've worked with all the major environmental groups, and what I've learned from them is that without diversity, evolution does not succeed. Evolution requires species to be dying out. It requires species to be emerging. It requires species who are completely and utterly irrelevant, useless, but rather pretty. There are species that are a threat to other species, and it is out of that dynamism, and in Taoism, forget this notion that yin and yang is harmony, it is internal struggle, comes the spark of life. Now, if that's good enough for God in terms of how the whole of creation is evolving, I honestly do not believe that we've been put here to come up with one system that God wants us to have so that everybody will agree. I actually think that diversity is a gift of God. Our problem has been that in Greek philosophy, which has profoundly shaped both Christianity and Islam in its more rigid forms, we have this belief in the monad. If only there was one God and one absolute system, one philosophy, one economic system, one democratic structure, whatever it is, everybody would be happy. But actually, it's nonsense. And that's why I think the fatal decision to make a joint statement on anything is a complete and utter waste of time, and in fact is dangerous. Nobody ever reads them. Nobody ever reads them because it doesn't mention Christ, it doesn't mention Mohammed, it doesn't mention the Buddha. So, who's it speaking to? What we need much more from an interfaith movement is, in response to the kind of crisis you had, was to actually know what the Baha'is thought and what they're going to do as a result. I don't care what they think. What are they going to do? What are the Muslims going to do? What are the Jews going to do? What are the Buddhists going to do? What are the 87 Christian groups going to do? No joint statement, but a joint collection of what comes from us, from our hearts, and what therefore will be what we will do because we have those resources. Don't do joint statements. Nobody reads them.
I'd just like to pick up on Samanwa's point about the paths and the options. I mean, I would love to feel that if there are inquirers who come to Bath, imagine students coming to Bath who are thinking about taking a faith path. I think it'd be a very beautiful thing if a range of faiths could say, look, there are a range of options. and faith has some very, very powerful qualities associated with it, deep and important qualities. So we're not going to try and sell you our exclusivist message. We're going to say, look around, look at what's there until you find the one that's right for you. I think we should be at the Freshers' Fairs, which would be a new one for us. I think Iris, and then, yeah.
It's in a way addressing about the interfaith group. So when the Bath interfaith group started more than 30 years ago, and I was not part of it, I'm told that it started as the curiosity of some people to understand more about the religions of the others. Now, I was very pleased when Isabel joined our group recently as a humanist, because it is not just about people from the different faith groups that need to understand each other. It's about all of the people understanding each other. So at schools, there used to be religious studies or religious education, and recently they've changed the name and they are calling it religion and worldviews. And the point is that maybe 30 or 40 years ago, if I understand correctly, in England, where the religious education was about teaching everybody to be Christian, nowadays that's not the point. The point is that we should all learn about everybody else so that we are not in fear of them. And when we get together as a Bath interfaith group, and maybe we need to look for a different name because it's not just interfaith, it's everybody. It's about building that trust together, about doing activities that can promote for us to engage with each other, to get to know each other. And after building that trust, and I think the panel referred to that before, then we can go into the deeper, more sensitive subjects. But we first need to get to know each other and trust each other.
I think Hafez at the back. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, panel. Thank you, William. I just wanted to say a couple words about the interfaith experience on the University of Bath. And I mention it maybe because William has already mentioned Bath Spa a couple of times and I felt a bit jealous. There's been excellent work that happened over the past couple of years. We have our visiting faith leaders, Iris and Imam Mohammad. And I say that there has been excellent work because it's been a work in progress and a deeply transformational experience that I was grateful to take part in. One, the Bath Interfaith Group, I invite you to tap onto university and into university societies. I know you mentioned the Freshers' Fair, maybe not the Freshers' Fair, but something else will come up in which I really think it's useful that the students take part in. And the second point, yes, one of the many things that I learned in the interfaith experience on university campus is what we mentioned today about friendships. And the one thing that I think we hope in a true friend is that they are helpful on the good days as well as the bad days. One of the pitfalls of interfaith work is that we only gather when there is a crisis, when there is a problem, and we need phone calls to go around, and we need so on and so forth. But it's when we gather in those times that it becomes somewhat disingenuous. What we found on university campus was that ability to create connection when there wasn't a reason to do so. There wasn't an urgent crisis, there wasn't a pandemic or whatever it may be, to make those connections that made the connection during crisis much more genuine and much more real. So the one thing about I think that I wanted to add about the friendships that you build within interfaith work is that you keep up the work whether there is a crisis or not, because it's when you come to connect in times of crisis that it becomes most genuine. But yeah, thank you.
That's a super point. Thank you. So I think we're gently moving to final observations, and then we'll ask if panel members have anything else they want to contribute to wrap up, and then people can be on their trains or whatever it is. Are there any final questions or observations from the floor? I'm looking around. Yes, David, Chair Emeritus of the Bath Interfaith Group.
Thank you. I want to go back almost to the beginning, to a point that you made, William, quite early in your introduction, and it's a question that is troubling me, and that is where we draw a dividing line between those who are beyond the pale in terms of extremism, fundamentalism. And you talked about love bombing. I mean, there are those who, and probably in all our different faith communities, there are those who don't want to relate specifically to interfaith, but may be perfectly genuine in their own cause. I as a Christian see within the Christian tradition elements with which I cannot relate as a Christian, where I see a theology that is totally false, and you've alluded to the various elements of that. And yet, each of us, I think, certainly within our own faith traditions, still have a responsibility to reach out. Basically, there cannot be anybody beyond the pale. So when I look at, well, we've talked about Christian nationalists, whether in the US or in Russia or anywhere else, because they are laying claim to the same faith tradition in its origins as my own. Therefore, somehow we still have to keep that line open and recognize our responsibility to make that connection. So that's an observation, and I don't have an answer, but I don't think there is a clear line to be drawn. I think we have to recognize that, there is always a need. There is always needs within our own individual faith traditions to reach out to those who we as dramatically disagree with and may want to call heretics or whatever.
I think it's a really great point, and I deliberately put that in the talk in a way to provoke that discussion. Is there a beyond the pale? So I think beyond the pale is a fence, isn't it? And beyond the pale means you're the other side of the fence. So I wonder if we ask our panelists for their final observations, I wonder if that's one of the things they could address. Is there a sort of limit or a boundary? Is there a beyond the pale? I mentioned two categories: violent fundamentalists who resort to violence to try and get their way, or people who have a disregard for the truth and whose behavior, supposedly on a faith basis, is taking us on a path towards conflict and violence. That's as well as I've tried to articulate, but I am uncomfortable about this question about whether there is a pale. So I wonder if we could ask our panel, starting with Martin and then just moving back, for any final observations, but particularly mindful of that question.
I very much agree with you. When I first started doing this work on the environment and the religions back in 85, well, before that, actually about 80, we had our big launch at Assisi, which was the big event at which the major faiths each made their own individual statements, because again, a common statement nobody will read. Those documents we were able to then take back to each faith tradition and say, and we gave them 1,000 words. That kind of brought about neurosis for most theologians, but it was very satisfying. And in 1,000 words, they had to summarize why they cared from within their own tradition for the environment. And it worked, because then we could go back to the Christian groups, to the Muslim groups, Jewish, Hindu, etc., and say, on page 2, you say this. Would that mean that you would, for example, ensure that all your wood was FSC certified? Or would you actually look at putting your investments into faith-consistent investing, which is what I head now as the biggest international group on that. We've got about just under $500 billion worth of religious investments that have said they want to move into ethical investing, so we're now trying to match them. But the really crucial issue was that after we did the Assisi event, which achieved huge international coverage, I went to speak in the States at Berkeley, at the theological college there, and there were 500 protesters outside from the evangelical, world. And I'm a liberal Anglican, as also a Darist. And I went out to talk to them, and I realized that what I understood by the Bible, they did not understand by the Bible. And I could not communicate to them. And I realized that I was not the right person to engage with that group, and that somebody had to emerge from that group who could speak that language, who could, and this is what happened 10 years later, put a bumper sticker on the back of a car which would say, "What would Jesus drive?" I couldn't do that. An American evangelical could. Now, the American evangelical world is, American evangelicals are the largest single group campaigning on climate change issues in America. Why? Because they know this is about the end of the world. And they know that an end of world that is not godly in origin is satanic in origin. And that's bad. Now, I don't follow that theology, but my goodness me, they are now some of the most influential people able to speak into government structures. And it's because we didn't give up on them. They weren't beyond the pale. It's just that I'm not of that culture. And let's rejoice in the fact that there's diversity. For God's sake, do not try and make us say the same thing, because it means none of us believe it. Let's say something from our hearts, and if you do that long enough, people begin to think, well, I wonder what we've got to say. That's the most profound challenge. Be out there, say it, show it, live it, do it. Others will want something of that.
Thank you, Martin. Heather, you've got final observations, and who's beyond the pale?
I think beyond the pale. So
do speak up, Heather, because
sorry.
Yeah.
I spent about 10 years working as a member of an independent monitoring board for a prison. It is surprising with whom you can build relationships that you wouldn't imagine was possible. So I only say that in terms of never assume that anyone is actually beyond the possibility of having a conversation with. And the other thing I want to say is, so I'm not going to name this person, but there is another priest in Reading with whom it helps me to have a relationship, and this person is on the very evangelical end of the scale. And I know, although we haven't discussed it, and that's going to be my point, I know that there are a lot of things that I believe that he does not believe, and that he finds some of my beliefs really very difficult. I think I probably find some of his beliefs actually very difficult. However, we have developed a really great relationship by not going there because we don't need to, but we can talk about the things that affect our ministry, and we can support one another because we are both dealing with congregations of people. And I would consider him a very good friend. And it works if you want it to work.
Thank you, Isabel. Yeah.
Thank you. Gosh, lots to speak to. That I've learnt so much already this evening, lots to think about, so my brain's a bit frazzled. But I'm going to push back against Martin with great respect on don't issue public statements because nobody's good. Well, maybe nobody will read them, but I think some collective statements, and I'm really interested in that thought, and I'm going to think about it a lot. And my pushback, I suppose, is that it's a great poetry, for instance. You read poetry and it speaks to a universal sense of emotion, understanding, and experience, and it opens a new world. And when people work together in a Tower of Babel situation and they find a sentence that all of them go, yes, I agree with that sentence, I am happy to say that came from me, that's success. And that's the golden rule in action as well, for me, is we're finding a common language. And we're not going to get it right all the time. We're going to make huge mistakes, but just the endeavour to try to find a common language shouldn't be ignored. So I'm going to leave that one there. But speaking to beyond the pale, I mean, for me, there are so many things that are beyond the pale. One of them that are the kind of a theme of being told what I can and can't do with my body, who I can love and who I can't love, who I can marry and who I can't marry legally, whether I can choose to end my life if I'm suffering unbearably because I'm being told by a law which has its roots in a belief system that I do not resonate with. For me, those things are beyond the pale. However, I am never not going to engage with it. I'm never not going to try and understand or learn or dig deep in myself to have a response to. It's like when, and I will finish in a second, I mean, I am going all over the place. I hope this is helpful. I don't know if you remember that awful James Bulger crime, with the poor, awful situation with a young boy who was so tragically, horrendously brutalized. Now, you could say that his killers were beyond the pale. I think in my life, that's the thing that I'm most, I don't know, viscerally responded to. And yet I heard an interview with the father, and nobody would speak to him. Nobody would speak to the father. He said, nobody engaged with me because it was so appalling. And everyone was like, I can't bring myself to talk to you about this because I feel so deeply and it's so painful. And there's such, the hypocrisy of that spoke to me of how can we not feel, how can we not, what's his name? I can never say his name properly. Thich Nhat Hanh. And he says, we are the abuser, we are the victim, we are the kidnapper, we are the kidnapped, we are the refugee. We are, if we can touch that common humanity in all of ourselves, nothing is beyond the pale, because we are beyond the pale.
Thank you, Isabel.
That's beautiful, Isabel. I think this question is a trap, William, in the sense that we all can be, yes, like you said, Isabel, we can all be beyond the pale, depending on how we define ourselves, really. And the difficult thing about this question is that it assumes that we have a static identity and that the other will always be an other, which is a principle that, I mean, coming from a Muslim tradition, that goes against the Quran itself. The Quran does not speak of, eternal enemies. If you have enemies, it actually speaks of provisional enemies. There is a verse in the Quran that says, عسى الله أن يجعل بينكم وبين الذين عاديتم منهم مودة والله قدير والله غفور رحيم. The verse is basically, this is part of a chapter in the Quran that speaks of an army that was attacking the Muslim community in Medina. And what it says literally, don't forget that God is powerful enough to bring about affection between you and the people that you take today as your enemies. So make sure that you treat them with righteousness and that you open your hearts to them when you come into contact with them. So what does it take? It takes basically reforming ourselves and working. I mean, if we are really personally and spiritually reformed, there will be no one beyond the pale. And if we're not, if we are self-centered, then everyone can be beyond the pale. Yeah.
Thank you, Imam Mohammad. So I was just saying, summary, I would like to pick up Hafez's point about maintaining contact even when it isn't a disastrous time. And we did do to that end our first Bath Interfaith Group social that I was aware of in September. It was great fun, I have to say. I think we'll do more. The statement, it was such hard work. I think for me, it was heard and appreciated as a biblical thing, isn't it? Even if one person sort of heard it, and that was sort of enough for me. But I completely take Martin's point that actually doing things is a lot more important than issuing statements. And to that end, I'm pleased to announce that later in November, we will be having our first mitzvah day. And the principle of that is just do something. Get together, do something worthwhile. I believe we may be making ceramic flowers. To contribute to the, yep.
Saturday, 22nd of November.
And
the flowers are to symbolize remembrance and hope. And they will then be handed out on Holocaust Memorial Day for all those who are suffering from wars and conflicts around the world.
So stay in touch with us, because that will be fun and creative. We're also going to start a discussion group, which is a small, quiet thing, but a way of having these conversations which are hard to have. We're looking at starting a choir, an interfaith choir for vaguely spiritual but not religious specific. This is a plan in progress. We've also got a plan to do a pilgrimage to Tbilisi, Georgia, where you will find the most extraordinary example of interfaith work in practice. One of our new members has introduced us to Bishop, he's called Bishop Malkaz there. He's a Baptist bishop whose tradition has suffered a lot of persecution, and their theology is to respond to intolerance and hatred with beauty. And so in his cathedral, he's built a synagogue and a mosque and a Buddhist prayer room. And the government hate him for it, and the Orthodox of all the religions, Christian and Jewish and Muslim, hate him for it. But it's a beautiful place, and we're going to go there. So he's going to do a week showing us around places in Georgia. It'll be very efficiently done, very cost-effective and so forth. So what I'm really boiling up to is do join the Bath Interfaith group. And I think our principle is anyone who wants to join is welcome. I think that'll be self-selecting. I think for now, that process will be self-selecting enough that anyone who wants to join is obviously not beyond the pale. So we will try to have fun and make friends. And I think in conclusion, before I hand over to Godfrey, I'd like to thank the Deputy Lord Lieutenant. We actually have two Deputy Lord Lieutenants tonight because Narinda, Vice Chair of the Interfaith Group, is also a Deputy Lord Lieutenant, but tonight in her role as Vice Chair. So thank you for joining us. Please send our regards back to the Lord Lieutenant. I would like to thank Mayor Emeritus Dina Romero for your introduction. And we really appreciate our work with the Mayor's Office. And I'd like to thank Brilsey, and I was going to finally thank Godfrey at the RCS, but perhaps I should hand over to you at this point. Hey!
Well, I'm sure we'd all like to say a great big thank you to William and the panel for this evening for an amazing evening's thoughts that we can go away to think about and discuss further. One of the things that I'm very, very passionate about, and there are a number of people in this room will agree, is young people and the amount of energy and support and just incredible ideas that they can come up with. And I think we have to tap into that. And it was good to hear from the university that there was areas that were being developed, because it's so important. I've met young people throughout the Commonwealth, and I've just been amazed by their ideas and their suggestions and their absolute love of the Commonwealth itself. So there are young people out there that we need to tap into. Somebody once said to me, "Oh, they're our future." And I said, "No, they're not our future, they're our present." We've got to tap into these people now, because they've got some incredible ideas and some really good suggestions, and we need to bring them into the community and bring them to the way of thinking. Thank you once again for coming. Do keep your eye on our website, rcsbath.org, because we have a number of events coming up. We have a tour of Fairfield House in January, when we'll give you an opportunity to see more of it and also meet some of the people that make it work. So please keep your eye on things, and we are going to be working, I know, greatly and more fully with William and everything he's doing. So thank you very much for coming, and safe journey home.